Hey everyone! So today we'll be looking at a video by conservative commentator Allie Beth Stuckey titled "Insane Leftists Cry Overpopulation at Vanderbeek Family," and answering the question, are leftists and environmentalists who oppose having large families anti-natalists?
It is a myth, and it's more of an anti-human, anti-baby, anti-natalist worldview than it has to do with climate change. There's this couple, James and Kimberly Vanderbeek, and he was on Dawson's Creek. He was also recently on Dancing with the Stars. He's done a lot of other things too. And they have 5 beautiful kids, and their family's just precious. So I do follow her, and I saw that they were featured on this Instagram account, and it was a precious picture of all 7 of them. And I went to the comments. I don't even know why. I just did. I went through the comments, and a huge number of the comments were about how many kids they have and how irresponsible it is for them to have that many kids, and how she looks really tired and she looks like she's super over it, and how could you have this many kids in this kind of climate? Well, also she shared on social media that she recently miscarried pretty late in her pregnancy with their 6th child, which is absolutely tragic. So obviously they're happy with the number of kids they have. They're even willing to have more kids than they have. And so all of these people who simultaneously scream, "My body, my choice, her body, her choice, you can do what you want with the baby in your womb," are also saying that, well, you can't have more kids than we, whoever they are, the climate activists of the world, you can't have more kids than we say is responsible.
Her accusation of hypocrisy is unfounded because most leftists and even most anti-natalists don't support taking away people's reproductive rights. Trying to dissuade people from having children is not even remotely the same as trying to impose a legal mandate, which is what anti-abortion advocates like Allie Beth want. I will say that shaming people for having children and berating strangers on Instagram is extremely ineffective advocacy. If you want to promote anti-natalism or a low-carbon lifestyle, this isn't the way to do it.
These are the same kind of people, by the way, who are constantly telling Christians and conservatives that we're judgmental, that we care too much about what they do with their lives. Now they're prying into one of the most personal decisions that a family can ever make: how many kids that you're gonna have. And they're saying, oh, you're irresponsible for that.
People across the political spectrum can be judgmental. Accusing Christians of being judgmental for simply speaking out against abortion is a red herring, because it takes the focus off the core issue and the conversation becomes about the people involved. It does come across as a bit hypocritical to be shaming a woman on Instagram for how many children she has, while accusing those who are merely speaking up for the unborn, who deserve rights as they see it, as shaming women for getting abortions. Some people certainly use shaming tactics in their anti-abortion advocacy, but others don't. Like, can we talk about the actual substance of our disagreement? I have 2 videos on the topic of abortion and why I believe it is justifiable, which you're welcome to watch, as I won't be discussing here. The substance of the disagreement here is what people are judging the Vanderbeeks for. I think it's valid to question the ethics of having 1 child, let alone 5. There are well-founded reasons why bringing a child into this world is wrong, which I outline in my video on antinatalism. So it follows that the more children you have, the more culpable you are. I don't, however, think it's valid to judge someone for their sexual orientation, gender expression, or decision to get an abortion, as Christians often do. It's not about whether it's wrong to judge, it's about what we are judging people for. Is it a valid concern? Being gay or trans or getting an abortion, in the vast majority of cases, doesn't cause harm. Having a child actually does cause harm. Here, I want to make a distinction between hard antinatalism and soft antinatalism. Hard antinatalism is the position that it's always wrong to have children, because you're imposing harm on your child by bringing them into existence, as suffering is an inevitable part of the human experience. This is an extremely counterintuitive and fringe belief, not held by most leftists. Soft antinatalism is the view that it is wrong to have children under certain circumstances. Although I think the argument for hard antinatalism has merit, I would consider myself more of a soft antinatalist. I believe it is wrong to have any children given the condition of the world. And this soft view is still unpopular among the left. Most leftists subscribe to an even softer antinatalism, which isn't really antinatalist. It's not wrong to have biological children, but it's irresponsible from an environmental standpoint to have more than two. To call this antinatalism is inaccurate. This is just environmentalism. She says these leftists are prying into one of the most personal decisions a family can make, how many kids they want to have. I want to be clear, I remain pro-choice regarding reproductive rights from a legal standpoint. But philosophically, I don't think having a child is entirely a personal choice, as it involves both the person you're bringing into the world, but also those affected by your child's consumption habits. People throw around the term personal choice as if it means any choice a person makes. A personal choice is a choice that does not cause harm to others. Having 5 children causes harm that is out of sight, out of mind, but harm nonetheless. It is undeniable that having a child is the biggest piece of your carbon footprint. So it follows that you will exceed your carbon budget if you have 5 children.
What they're saying is a myth. There is not an overpopulation problem. So they see, these climate activists, they say, okay, we've got a finite amount of resources in the world. And since 1980, we have increased our population by 3 billion. And eventually we're gonna run out of resources because we have too many people. But that is a faulty mindset. That is when you view people as liabilities rather than assets. And environmentalists always have, not always, but leftist environmentalists almost always have an anti-human point of view. They see us as the problem. They see us at war with the earth rather than what most people really are. Sure, there's irresponsible people that maybe irresponsibly drain resources, but most people are assets. So most people actually contribute to the good of the world around them, either economically or actually caring for the earth. Even having a family is a way that you help humanity, is a way that you help the earth.
There are some myths regarding overpopulation, one being that the core problem is overpopulation rather than overconsumption. The problem is our growing consumer culture. A lifestyle that demands more emissions than the global average is a strain on our limited resources. We have enough resources to support 9 to 10 billion people sustainably, but those resources are grossly unequally distributed and wasted. People who decry overpopulation are usually liberals who recognize that climate change is a problem, but want to maintain their current level of consumption. And of course, hard antinatalists see population in general as a problem. But Allie Beth is a conservative commentator who regularly appears on Fox News. She sees neither overpopulation nor her level of consumption as a problem. She advocates for a system that allows people to amass large amounts of wealth and freely consume as much as they want at the expense of others. Where she sets the bar for responsible consumption is clearly higher than where climate scientists would set the bar, as she sees having 5 children as perfectly reasonable. The global average is 7 tons of carbon equivalent per person per year. The average North American emits 28 tons of CO2 equivalent per year. What is irresponsibly draining the world's resources, if not having 5 children as a wealthy person in Western society? As for environmentalists being misanthropic, it's not that we hate humans, it's that we hate the destruction caused by humanity. We hate the ideologies and behaviors that create human and animal suffering. And sometimes this manifests as hatred of the people who promote such ideologies and engage in such behaviors, which I don't condone. Both sides are susceptible to an us versus them, good versus evil mentality. But by objective measures regarding policy outcomes, if anyone is anti-human, it's Republican Party loyalists. You can think you're pro-human, but corporate propaganda can push you to support policies that put profit over people. And religion can push you to make irrational decisions, like having a litter of children. If you look at the consequences of these decisions, it becomes clear that conservative ideology does not serve humanity.
Now, we talked about on Monday, we talked about the truths and the falsehoods in climate change and climate activism, and how we should look at climate change from a biblical perspective. But there are a lot of myths surrounding climate change that say, okay, if you have more babies, then that's irresponsible and your carbon footprint is going to be huge. But the reality is that's just not true, because human beings contribute more than they actually take away.
Evidence? If this were the case, then we would have solved global problems already, and we wouldn't be racing towards climate collapse.
Because extreme poverty also since 1980 has been cut in half. And so if it were true that we had a finite amount of resources, and if it were true that human beings are taking away from these resources to the point to where we're not going to have any anymore, and the world is just going to get worse and worse, then that wouldn't be the case. As the population has increased by 3 billion since 1980, extreme poverty, you would think, with our very finite resources, would have increased along with that, but it hasn't. It has actually gone down by half. So it is a myth, and it's more of an anti-human, anti-baby, anti-natalist worldview than it has to do with climate change.
And her evidence is that extreme poverty has fallen. I'll get into why this statistic is misleading, but it's hilariously ironic because wealth creation under capitalism leads to an increase in emissions. And we haven't run out of resources yet. Key word, yet. We're approaching the crest, and we know that there's a huge drop-off in the near future. So even if we're still technically advancing, is it really advancement if the consequences will be abysmal? Anyway, the reason this stat is misleading is because it's true that extreme poverty has fallen in the past century. But capitalism doesn't deserve the credit because capitalists have constantly fought efforts to reduce poverty. The capitalist class could eliminate poverty if they wanted to, but they don't because it's not profitable. Scientific discovery, technological advancement, and progressive politics, in spite of capitalism, have decreased global extreme poverty and increased life expectancy. Also, note the language. Extreme poverty is declining, but the cutoff for what is considered extreme is extremely low at $1.90 per day. By other metrics, poverty is rising. For example, stats showing poverty decreasing refer to the proportion of people, not the absolute number of people. And institutions like the World Bank use clever tricks to manipulate numbers and paint a feel-good narrative that supports the status quo. A topic for another video. In short, poverty is still a huge feature of society as the rich get exorbitantly richer and the middle class shrinks. Only 5% of new income from global growth goes to the poorest 60% of humanity, people living on less than $7.40 a day. Jason Hickel writes in an open letter to Steven Pinker and Bill Gates, "On our existing trajectory, according to research published in the World Economic Review, it will take more than 100 years to end poverty at $1.90 a day, and over 200 years to end it at $7.40 a day. Let that sink in. And to get there with the existing system, in other words, without wealth redistribution, we will have to grow the global economy to 175 times its present size. Even if such an outlandish feat were possible, it would drive climate change and ecological breakdown to the point of undermining any gains against poverty. It doesn't have to be this way, of course. We can end poverty right now, simply by making the rules of our global economy fairer for the world's majority." Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe for more videos, and I'll see you next week. Peace.
Yo, how when me eat them, I wonder when me eat. When me tell them say me no eat no fish, no meat now. How when me eat them, I wonder when me yam. When me tell them say that I'm a vegan man. How when me eat them, I wonder when me eat. When me tell them say me no eat no